who set out to build a brand new steam engine from scratch, they're absolutely chuffed.
This is the story of a dream.
The cost is in excess of £3 million.
I think we may have emptied the tank. That isn't a good thing.
Which many said was impossible.
Sorry, the screwdriver was a bit damp. Blow down starting!
What happens if you try to build a brand new mainline steam engine from scratch?
Can you start with the one at the top, Alan?
Yes, I can.
It's the washer to go with
Yes.
nut 13 and bolt.
So how do you actually want it to...
Well, these enthusiasts have a plan. They want to build one of these. 49 A1 class locomotives were built just after the war. They were rendered extinct by the scrapman in the 60s. So, in 1990, a group of men came up with an idea: build a brand new one.
It started off as almost, I think, a pub discussion with the back of an envelope, 6 men round a table or so, discussing, wouldn't it be nice to have an A1? And rather than that conversation ending with, yes, it would be nice, wouldn't it, and nothing happening, it was taken a bit further and sort of an outline plan produced, an idea as to whether it would actually be feasible and whether the money could be raised.
Based in London, Mark Allett is a full-time marketing man. He found himself drawn into the scheme early on, convincing others and then getting them to part with their cash.
Okay. Have you had a chance to go through the costings that Rob sent through? The biggest challenge right from that time was from the people who said it won't happen, it can't happen, you'll never do it. It was the sceptics.
The doubters may have had a point. While there are plenty of restored steam engines, nothing this ambitious had ever been tried before.
Hello, we're raffling off the headboard, £65 or £1 each. In each direction. A straight donation will be fine there. In every sort of thing I've been involved in, there's always a lot of people who know how to spend money. There are very, very few, if any, who actually know how to raise it. And so we came up with the idea of a lot of people giving a small amount of money on a regular basis. Now setting the drawing size.
3 years in, there's enough money to get the original plans out of the National Railway Museum in York. At the computer, David Elliott.
These drawings were in random rolls, as they'd been effectively rescued out of a skip several years earlier when the locomotive works had been throwing out all the steam drawings. If we had had to sit down and redraw this locomotive from scratch, it would have probably doubled the total amount of effort required, because we would have effectively been designing a new complex machine to run on the railway.
While the nascent British Railways built the A1s, they were designed by Arthur Peppercorn, the last chief mechanical engineer of the London and North Eastern Railway. At an early project meeting, his widow Dorothy offers strong support and a bold promise is made. The new engine would be a genuine 50th member of the A1 class, rather than a replica. In 1994, Dorothy is able to press the button to cut the first bits of metal. There were high hopes the engine could be finished by the millennium. It was soon taking shape at the Trust's HQ, an old converted carriage shed in Darlington. It even had a name, but progress was slow.
What we hadn't got to at that stage was to reach a critical mass in terms of having the finances available to build things any faster. 49 A1s were built in 2 sites in under 2 years, which is a phenomenal achievement. But there were probably thousands of people involved in that project doing that.
The new Peppercorn A1 will also fill a gap in railway history. A lot of examples of express engines from the East Coast Main Line have been preserved. The A1 is a missing link.
They were a good, fast express engine. The A1s have their place, particularly in the post-war era of identity with high-speed operation on particularly the East Coast Main Line, the east of England.
By the time the new engine has its wheels, the year 2000 has long gone. It's proving to be a complicated job.
In the days when steam locomotives were in mainstream production, most railway workshops were virtually self-contained. In extremis, crew works would take in pig iron at one end of the process and send out complete locomotives at the other. What this meant was that all the skills you needed and knowledge was contained within the workshop.
Ready? Yeah, we're off.
It's relearning lost skills from the past. Plus, application of as much new technology as we realistically can, where it saves money and makes the whole process safer and simpler.
We've actually had components for the locomotive built not only throughout the UK, but also across the world as well. And it's been finding those cottage industries that could do things.
And some parts are being built in a garden shed in West Yorkshire.
I always describe myself as one man, a boy and a dog setup. I've been self-employed now for 20 odd years and I'm totally unemployable by anybody else.
Ian Howitt is an independent engineer with the job of building the frames for Tornado's tender. Today, they need to be turned over to work on the other side. Space is tight.
There was never a panic. You think there's a, you know, when it's happening, you make a dive for it, but no, we weren't in danger of knocking the wall down. We've done lots and lots of smaller bits, motion pins, brake gear, brake hangers, a lot of work actually on site in Darlington, doing the routine sort of fitting and fiddling and general handwork that's involved with this type of project.
But the major challenge is finding the new engines beating hard. Without a boiler to make steam, it's going nowhere. But they're not exactly available off the shelf. The search takes the trust 1,000 miles from Darlington to the fairy tale former East German town of Meiningen.
Meiningen's just a bit weird, really, I suppose, in the fact that you suddenly arrived there and there was almost this Doncaster or Darlington works from the 1960s that had been preserved in aspic and was able to do so many of the things that we just wish we'd have been able to do in our own country.
The Germans rise to the challenge of building a boiler which should meet modern safety regulations.
We were provided with the old drawings from the National Archives at York, and we converted the original design, which was riveted boiler, to an all-welded, all-steel boiler.
For the project supporters, this is a milestone. The boiler is Tornado's biggest and most expensive component.
They all feel like little fathers of this project, I think, because they all donated money to it.
We have a special deal we can do for you just for this trip. £50 for the small ones, £400 for the slightly bigger ones. So if anyone would like to sign up to help us support the boiler, we'll be taking names in the cafeteria.
You might not believe it, but boilers are incredibly flexible things.
Yeah, well,
and as the pressure rises and falls over, over a cycle of steaming, this tube plate will flex and will actually, if that plate was just teed on.
I think they're possibly one of only a couple of places in the world that could do this now, so we're impressed. I'm an engineer in the aerospace industry, and this is good work, I know.
The design is the key area for us coming to Meiningen. Yes, they have a wonderful fabrication facility, but we could have got this done in a British factory. East Germany was operating steam till 1988. The regulations in this country have kept up with welding and other techniques, whereas the regulations in the UK as far as steam locomotives stopped in 1970.
It's the thing that people said would never happen. Every stage we got to, they said, well, yes, you can do that bit, but the boiler, you'll never get to the boiler. And of course we have, and it's the first time a boiler for a British steam locomotive has been built of this size since probably 1961. I've always believed in the fact we would find a way of finishing it. We've found a way of solving every single problem we've come across to date.
I could have got it made in this country. No disrespect to the A1 Trust, but they felt that they wanted somebody to make it who had a track record in building boilers. We do still have fairly substantial fabrication facilities available. That was my big disappointment, that it wasn't made in this country.
But it's not the end of the job. There's still time for Ian to prove Tornado can be the best of British.
We're at the stage now where we do all these bits and the engine doesn't actually look any different. Putting the wheels under takes a day and everybody comes along and says, oh, you've done something. And we've now got lots and lots of bits like this. What we're doing, this is the valve spindle crosshead surrounded by this mould. We are going to pour this white metal, which is a mixture of tin and lead. This is a routine process that was done every day in any big running shed in the country. Sorry, the screwdriver was a bit damp. We have a new bit of technology, which is a laser infrared thermometer, which tells us what temperature it is. The trouble with all these digital things is they never make their mind up what they want. The tech is not very high on this, I fear. I just think danger of burning one's pinkies here. It's very much a budget type process because we're only doing 3. You know, if we were building a batch of 50 and we'd have 150 of these to do, we'd probably spend a week on making the sophisticated fixture up. We've spent about half a day making that.
We are basically different from most restoration projects. Normal locomotive restoration is 80% good DIY skills and it's 20% serious engineering. Because we haven't got lots of rusty components to take to pieces, we're the other way round. We're 80% serious engineering and 20% DIY skills.
Another year slips past, another big job is underway, and another key player joins the team.
How much you got your side on the car taxi?
Graham Bunker is the project's operations director. His knowledge of steam is encyclopedic, like how to stop a half-built engine.
That'll do. Bloody hell.
So chaps, it can't be done.
It's not quite there yet, but you know.
21 tons of boiler must be carefully guided onto Tornado's frames. This is the first time it has been offered up to the engine, and it needs to fit precisely first time.
It's a tight fit.
Well, yeah.
About an inch.
Fortunately, this bit of cross-Europe unification goes perfectly.
As one of our guys said, we managed to get the boiler onto the locomotive without having to resort to an angle grinder once. And that is a great tribute to the accuracy the Germans managed to build into it.
What we have outside is an area that has never had track in it before. So when the boiler went onto the frames, it sort of shrunk a bit and it sunk into the ground, which meant getting it back in on a little bit of a slope was a bit more hard than we thought it was going to be.
Almost. That's it.
So we had forklift trucks pulling, we had Land Rovers pushing, we had people pushing, and in the end we had a winch as well, and we got her in.
Elsewhere, the tender tank is taking shape. As the form of a peppercorn A1 emerges, construction steps up a gear.
I honestly think you're going to have to come back half an inch there and 3/8 on that side.
Ian Howitt's tender frames arrive.
Whoa. Something went.
And are finally united with their wheels.
Look at that. Right to the bit of wood. Right, yeah, that's it, lovely.
And they actually atomise oil so that the pistons are being lubricated as they're running in the cylinder.
The oil comes in under pressure from the Wakefield lubricator.
Yep. Side, and then it's exiting.
It's the time of year for Tornado supporters to get together. By now, 1,500 people are regularly giving money, some of them since day one, and it won't be long before their faith is tested.
You can turn this by hand when you lift this locomotive
really?
with all the rods.